Welcome to all of our friends out there who have been watching the film tonight. We hope that you enjoyed it. I want to take a minute to introduce myself and my friend here, Dr. Terrence Ruth. But I'm Yvonne Brannon. I am the chair of Public Schools First NC. So glad that all of you are here tonight. I am a former social worker who went back to school and got her doctorate in social sciences, social psychology, and now am conducting social science research at NC State. Terrence, tell us a little bit about yourself.
How you doing, everyone? I'm Terrence Roof. I teach for the social work department at NC State, and I really do several of these workshops with Yvonne in Wake County, and excited to have y'all join us tonight.
So we've never had such a wonderful opportunity. Thousands of people watched the film tonight on our Vimeo link, and we're really excited about that, and it's been so successful. We hope that we can do something like this again. We also have not ever done an after film live webinar before. We usually do these in person. So we're going to do the best we can tonight, and I hope you'll be patient with us. We're going to do the best we can to try to give you some highlights of some of the workshops that we do for teachers, for administrators, for principals, for parents, for PTAs. And so we're going to try to just give you a quick run through those, and then hopefully at the end we'll have a chance to get some questions from you guys. One of the things that we love to do when we're in person, and we're going to take a shot at doing it tonight and see how we can do. You can, enter your comments in the chat box there. But kind of what stood out as you watched the film? Was there something that you saw that you thought was really important, or really a new way of thinking about things? Is there anything that surprised you in the film? Anyone have any comments? We'd love to see them here in our chat box. I'll give you a second to respond to that. In the meantime, I'd like to add that normally we ask people also to kind of talk about what their score was. I hope you had a chance to look at the ACES Find Your Score that we sent out to you guys. I hope you had a chance to look at that. It's kind of a great way to get a feel for the film when you're listening through there. If you know your own score, it kind of helps you have the same conversation. You kind of know what it's like to have ACEs of 3 or 4, or ACEs of 5 or 6, and when you look at some of the data. So in person, what Terrence and I usually share is that I am a 7, and Terrence, you are?
I am an 8.
An 8. So those are things that we share with folks because we like to think of ourselves as good examples of children who were traumatized, who were able to, through the help of very loving and caring adults, become successful adults on our own. And so I hope you'll be thinking about that when you go through there. So one of the things that someone just posted was that what really impressed them the most about the film was looking at the brain scans. I have to say that that's one of the things that really stuns me every time I see the film, and I watch the film probably once a week at least. It stuns me to look at those brains development, looking at the stress and without stress. I agree. Someone else said it really impacted them, the whole concept of not what's wrong with you, but what's happening to you, what's going on with you. Yes, I thought that was pretty powerful too. It's one of the most powerful moments in the film to me personally, because I remember back in my own childhood thinking how many times I would have appreciated being asked that question instead of what was, straighten up, be quiet, put your, sit up. I would have really appreciated someone saying to me, what's going on with you today? What can I do to help you? So let's go on. And I think those are 2 really great suggestions. The other thing I want to kind of get out on the table pretty clearly is that I am not a practicing social psychologist right now. I'm not a counselor. I am trained a social worker who now does research. But I do want to say that how did we, people who are very involved in public education advocacy, like Dr. Ruth and I are, how do we get, all of us get involved in this? And it's because it's pretty simple. The more we learned and the more we worked in our own practices over time, and Terrence as a teacher and a principal, we realized how prevalent trauma was. We saw it all the time in our schools. We also know that when children come to school, that it impacts their ability to learn. It impacts the ability of children around them to learn. I've had people say to me, it's really great. I'm so really thankful my kid doesn't have any of these traumas. And I say, yes, I am very happy for you too, but your child is sitting in a classroom full of kids who are also that are struggling. So all of these children impact each other. So we also know that schools are the only safe, stable place in the lives of many children. We know that children are more likely to get the mental health services they need through their public school than in any other place. And in fact, there's been research studies that show that if children who need these kind of services, 85% of them get them through the school, through the social worker, the counselor, or links in the community, or they don't get it at all. So we know that schools have a powerful role. We know that they can create a trauma-informed climate that improves the social, emotional, and academic success of every child. But as you'll know, when we go through this workshop webinar tonight, that you will see the critical need we have in our schools for helping professionals. And we use that term helping professionals to include nurses, social workers, school psychologists, and school counselors. And these are critical roles in our schools, and we will find out how woefully understaffed and underfunded our schools are in these resources. So to kind of get back to the film that we watched tonight in kind of a summary way, I'll just highlight a few things that we learned tonight. And one of those is that the impact of trauma and what it can do, how it triggers toxic stress and all the things that it does, how children vary, how building resilience is absolutely possible, and how the presence of compassionate teachers and coaches or any adult mentors in a school setting can help provide the stable, nurturing climate that these kids need to be successful.
Yeah, and there's several on the website. If you go to our website, and we'll show the link to it later, you'll see much of the content here. We're skipping through sort of layers of information. But there's one thing that you should know that we've learned is, number one, is toxic stress impacts across class, across race, really across grade levels. And it's really important that your schools are aware that it may look different in different students, and so that you customize it. And so what is the effect, and who is affected? What we know is that 1 in 4 children experience toxic stress. Also, we know, and this is in North Carolina, that the suicide is the second leading cause of death from children ages 10 to 17, which doubled from 2008 to 2018. And even teaching at the college level, we see that travel with the student on to higher ed as well. And next, as we will find out what is the impact across sort of our nation. You know, we zoomed into North Carolina, but nationally, who is being impacted? And one thing we know is that there's nearly 35 million US children have experienced adverse childhood experiences or some level of childhood trauma. And we know that experience is also costly. We know that we are paying the price in our economy. We're paying the price through our families, in our communities. And again, if we total up that cost, it's over $1 billion hundreds of billions of dollars, I'm sorry, each year.
And Terrence, I'd like to go back just for a minute and look at these numbers for a second. And I want to point out that we understand that we are in the middle of an event that is very traumatic for kids and their families.
Yeah.
These numbers reflect current numbers before, if you would, the pandemic. We don't know. We can only imagine if we look back at some of these numbers for next year, if we look back at the end of this year and see what the economic impact is on our kids, their families, the number of kids living in poverty, the number of kids who are homeless, the number of kids who may be falling into emotional and physical abuse during the next period of time in our country and in our state and in our county, even within our very school. So I do want to at least mention that we're very cognizant of that. And it's something that I think makes our discussion, our work with identifying, preventing adverse childhood experiences, our work to prevent child abuse and neglect is even more critical than ever before based on this data. And so I'll move on back. Thank you, Terrence, for letting me slide back on that slide. And so we come back to talk about, and when we look at this film and what it means and what we can do, we come back to talk about the role of helping professionals. And helping professionals are not just important in terms of providing direct services to kids, which are very important, but they also are the liaison that connects the child and the family to community resources. The social worker is the person who's working with the family to find resources, mental health services, housing, a lot of other services in the community. But the other thing that we have found in really successful programs where we see that the school is truly operating as a trauma-informed is that they also help train other educators in the building. They become a resource, not just the children and their families, but they become a resource to helping teachers deal with the issues in their classrooms, helping them learn how to understand resilience and toxic stress and all these adverse childhood experiences, and they become a real resource. We'd like to see the helping professionals in every school do more than just that. We'd like to see that they can train the SROs. We know that there's a lot of controversy around school resource officers. Are they trained appropriately to know how to deal with children, especially children who have high ACE scores, children who are already experiencing trauma? So, you know, an excellent thing that we could do if we had enough staff in a school would be to have them work with the SROs, work with the cafeteria staff, work with the bus drivers, because a school that is really successful knows how to identify traumatized children and how to teach resilience to these and every child in the school to be able to work functionally. So with that in mind, I want to show you our next slide. And I'm sorry, we're going to talk really fast because we have a lot to share and we really want to have some time to get your questions. But these are some startling numbers. We haven't updated them recently, and I can only imagine the strain on the budget that's coming for our public schools and trying to pay for all the folks while they're out and then bring them back. I can't imagine what school is going to be forced to do. But right now, the experts recommend that we have a school counselor for every 250 students. The state pays for one for every 413. You can see the figures. I won't read all of them. 250 for social workers. Look at the ratio. School psychologists. Look at the nurse. That we should have a school nurse for every 750 students, or at least one nurse per school. We have on average like a nurse for every 2,315 kids. And in many schools, this is worse. Many places, there's one school nurse for the entire school system. And even in Wake County, that is doing the has wealth behind it and many more assets for it that they have. They have social workers with having 2 or 3 schools, and at least 2 schools where they might have anywhere from 1,400 to 2,400 students in those 2 schools. That social worker is doing nothing but triage, just doing suicide alerts most of the time. And if ever we needed a school nurse in every school to deal with everything from allergies that children have, to special medication they have to take every day, to things like we're going to be facing now in the future when children have fevers, and how we deal with that and how we provide that resource. We can't expose our teachers and our other educators, our teacher assistants, our principal. They can't be dealing with all these health issues and running the school. Helping professionals also are needed because teachers cannot do it all. One note that, Terrence, you wanted to talk about this a little bit, how the study changed to now.
Yeah, and really what's pretty significant is looking at how there's areas in this sort of indicators that we don't normally think about. If the incarceration of a parent, involvement in foster care, these are some of these factors that we normally don't consider when we think about the impact of trauma and stress. And also one big one is separation and divorce, the impact of that. And then in some communities, mental illness is not even a discussion. And so most of the time that discussion starts in the school building. And so the mental illness in a family member, it also plays a role.
So the ones that are in here in red, the reason we put these in here for you guys is because the original ACEs studies you saw was done some time ago, and it was done by a health insurance company, and it was primarily middle-class white families. And now we know that since that study was first done, and studies that have come after that have also added in as ACEs, other than these first original ones, they've added in racism, the impacts of bullying, gender identification and sexual orientation, and discrimination, immigration, and now pandemic. So we understand that that's an evolving kind of a list. We wanted to make sure that folks did not think that we were overlooking these new layers of adverse childhood experiences and trauma that impact our children. So now we're going to move into a section. We're going to try to give you a couple of quick suggestions and things we can do. And Dr. Ruth, I'll let you take it from here.
So I know many of your questions are going to sort of hover around what can we actually do, and so we designed some trainings over the last summer that would be really specific to schools and the PTA, and then to administrators and teachers. And so we tried to sort of zone in as much as possible. But there's so much research. If you go and look, there's so much research around resilience, ACEs. And so we decided to zone in particularly on how to build relationships with students, and from different perspectives, from the PTA perspective, from the parent perspective, from the teacher perspective, and then the administrator. So we have a 6 sort of prong approach. And the research say the top 3, listen, reassure, and validate, they said teachers are really strong in those areas. But respond, repair, and resolve, those are the areas where we are seeing learning and development and improvement around building relationships with students. Now, here, what you'll see is we try to zone in now to administrators. As an administrator, as overseeing a school and several teachers, what does it mean to foster a trauma-informed school? Now, what surprised us when we started going around the state, really training and doing a workshop on resilience, is that there were several teachers who actually have yet to deal with their own personal childhood trauma. And so we see where administrators can play a key role in making sure that trauma-informed schools deal with every individual in the building. so that the trauma-informed atmosphere actually trickled down to the student. But as you see and listen, reassure and validate and respond and resolve and repair, it's particular to administrators in this particular context. But you want to, in this area, we want to put the star next to validate, because we really want to promote student perspectives. And we realize that in K through 12 environments, the professional is often heard, but that student voice, what is happening with the student, is often not as high on the priority list in terms of voices being heard.
And I would just add that we all know this, but it's worth saying again, is that the principal, the system principal, the department heads, the leaders in the school set the tone. And when we've been in schools where the principal is and the leaders of the school are calling us to come in, and they're saying, we want to be a trauma-informed school. We want to look at, everything we're doing, all the policies we have. We want to foster that our practices and our professional development, everything we do is trauma-informed. Those schools are the ones that do get it done, I can tell you, because it's great when your counselor wants to do this, or a classroom teacher here or there, the librarian wants to do it. But when the principal and the assistant principals and department heads, when this is their goal, it makes a huge difference. Here's your slide on teachers, Terrence.
What's important here about teachers is really the repair part, in my opinion. Once a kid has demonstrated that they've experienced some trauma, and you have listened and you understand and you have reassured and you validate, it is really responding and you're resolving that really leads to your repair. And so, reflect as a class on incidents that occur, and talk about the value of repairing relationships in the classroom. Because what we're seeing is that a kid will find that one adult, even if it's the janitor, a kid will find that one adult that is willing to listen and that's willing to repair. And what we're teaching teachers is to be sort of sensitive to those sort of silent and verbal messages that say that, hey, listen, I'm experiencing trauma, or I'm going through something that I can't explain. And so here with the teachers, we try to give a little bit of strategies around really nurturing that relationship and creating trauma sensitive environment through sort of hitting these 6 points.
And one of the things that we won't have time to go into tonight, but is all the wonderful stories that teachers have told us about things they're doing in their classroom to make children understand that they are worthy, validating their worth. That's not around their behavior or their grades, but finding a way to validate them as a person, and building that relationship and letting kids know that they're liked, they're loved, they're safe is a great way to teach resilience and give kids a chance to take a chance, right? And too often we see in classrooms that we observe is that kids are looking that if they don't behave correctly or their grades aren't where they need to be, they feel unworthy in that class. So that's a great thing that teachers can learn. So again, we do whole workshops on just one topic, but now we're going through here kind of quickly, and we want to talk a little bit now about, we understand and principals and leadership are important. Teachers can, even without their principal, can implement in their own classroom things to make their classroom be trauma informed. And if we have time at the end, we'll share a few stories of some of the cool things that we've seen teachers do in their own classroom. But now we just want to touch a little bit on how parents can also build, teach resilience to their own children. Now, when we were looking at this tonight, getting ready for a workshop, we looked at the first one. It says spend one-on-one time with your kids. I think you're doing that right now. Probably more than you ever thought possible. So, but truly, one of the things that we find normally in our busy life, and especially with children who are going through a lot of trauma at school, things that don't feel so big to us but feel big to them, is we really understand that it's important to connect with our kids, to have one-on-one time for them, to encourage that they do problem solving, that we try to encourage them to figure things out with encouragement and not criticism. And maybe this is going on at your house right now if you have kids there, but learning, the importance of maintaining routines is extremely important, especially in kids in grades K through 8. And listening, a lot of times when you look at what's going on with kids, one of the most important things that we see lacking is that they've had any time for listening, for parents to do that. But again, we're going to go over this pretty quickly, but teaching kids self-care, being positive, and I'm sure that right now you're practicing a lot of these things. You're probably doing great out there building these relationships with your kids because you're trying to be optimistic right now. And optimism and resilience go hand in hand. You can do it. I know you can. I have faith in you. You're that kind of person. You always figure things out. I've never had any doubt that you couldn't do it. I trust you. These are all reaffirming things that help kids feel optimistic and teach them resilience. And the last thing is modeling resilience yourself. And when even kids we've talked with over time have said that when they talk about that teacher they like the most, or that coach they like the most, or that Sunday school teacher they like the most, or what they like most about their parents, it's usually around how they see that adult act. Does that adult act calm? Does that adult cope with adversity in a positive way? You forgot your gym clothes. Okay, how do we handle that? You forgot your lunch money, or your lunch is still on the counter. How do we deal with that? But showing kids how we deal with adversity and making mistakes is really one of the most important things. But we wanted to go on and talk a little bit more about also reminding parents that building a relationship with your child's school is also very important in helping your kid develop confidence and resilience. You need to collaborate with your teachers. You need to make sure that you and your teacher are on the same page, and you help celebrate the victories when your kid has those. Advocating for your child is very important, and this is critical, and a lot of parents feel reluctant to do it. And I'm not talking about argumentative or negative or demanding advocacy, but we're talking about making sure that we're going to our schools or calling or emailing and getting help from helping professionals when we see that our kids are struggling. That's what they're there for. And speak up when you think that your child isn't getting the services they need. Help your child figure out how to deal with adversity. And if you can't, then seek help from your school and from, and see if you can get there. But I won't go into all of these, but I want to really make sure that I emphasize how important it is for you to value your child's viewpoint. It doesn't mean that you have to always concur with it or believe all the details or believe exactly how they said it, but that you value that they're concerned about something, or they're worried about something, or upset about something. This is really, really important in teaching kids how to build confidence and to validate their worth, and to give them that ability to cope, to thrive, to get over things, to deal with things. That's what resilience is, right? The ability to cope and thrive and to make it through adversity. So the last thing that I'll talk about, and then I'll turn this back to you, Terrence, is that one of the things that I want you to also consider, now that you're all trauma informed and eager to do things a little differently, is don't forget about your PTAs. And these things I'm going to talk about here could apply to your church, your civic organization, nonprofit you volunteer with or work with. But we're going to pick on PTAs a little bit now, because a lot of people who work in school settings, either as educators or as parents, are are run into these kind of problems. But one of the things that we see a lot in PTA and membership is that be sure that you're inclusive. Think about all the demographics in your school. If you're a PTA person watching us tonight and joining us, we hope that you'll look for unique and diverse ways to engage all your families. Be very deliberate about the programs you do, and consider changing things up a little bit. We've learned this last couple of weeks, we can do virtual meetings. We can do call-in meetings that allow all kind of families to participate. People can do meetings on their phone. We can do surveys on our phones. I think the fact that many people were already operating their whole lives around a cell phone because they don't have a landline or maybe any computer at their home, but they have their smartphones. So we've learned a lot this week, and so let's apply this knowledge in the future to make sure that we are very inclusive in who we involve, and let's keep our memberships low, because really joining PTA should not depend on just if you can afford to pay membership or not, right? And the same thing, we've seen a lot of things in fundraising as we've traveled through the state the last 3 or 4 years that have been very great, and some things that have been very, very tough on kids who can't afford it. We saw a poster the other day at a school we were in that said, kids, 70, for every kid's parents who joined the PTA, they'd be put in a raffle for free lunch, and it had all these places listed you could go to a free lunch. So if that was me back in the day, I would not be able to be in that drawing for a free lunch. That made me pretty sad. I think it's important to use fundraising strategies that reward all students, not just an individual student, or reward the ability for every child to participate. We saw the next school we went to was a little bit better, Terrence. It was like 75% of the class participates in PTA membership. We'll have a pizza party for the whole class. That was a little bit better. But we like to see classroom goals or school goals so that it's not on the child who cannot afford to do it. We've also seen kids who can't participate in theme days. They can't buy the spirit wear. They can't buy the t-shirt. They don't have a green t-shirt for Green Day. But a lot of PTAs are really becoming much more sensitive about that, and they're providing the t-shirts, or they're making sure that every teacher has a couple of spirit wear shirts in the back of their room, or a couple of green t-shirts in the back of the room. So there are a lot of things that we can do. And I'll end this discussion by saying it's really important that we make sure the programs that we're presenting that are going to be diverse in their topics, promote diversity. We make sure that if we can, that we have interpreters at our schools if they're needed. We provide childcare if we can, that we vary the time we have the meetings, that we do them in different style. These are all things that one would do if they wanted to be a really trauma-informed school. So again, we can spend a whole workshop on PTA being trauma-informed, whole workshop on parents, and we're just trying to throw in here and squeeze in some of the highlights. So thank you for hanging in there with us. So Terrence, I'll let you talk a little bit about
yes. I really think it's really significant that, number one, that you educate others about ACEs, and also invite us to your PTA, invite us to your school, invite us to your community. Really, we would love to see individuals see the film and also get additional strategies. And the school does a good job at collecting data on students, right? You got suspensions, you got free and reduced lunch, et cetera. But some of the trauma-informed, some of the trauma experienced by students are not captured in the data of schools. And so there has to be a sensitivity that you develop in order to be able to sort of see and address some of the things you're seeing in your classroom, in your community, in your PTAs. But also you want to be, you want to champion trauma-informed training at your school, at your home, in your community. But there's some hard sort of things that we encourage that you advocate for. Number one is better healthcare and mental health services. The next one, livable wages. All these things we're highlighting. We've been doing this training for a little while. We're starting to see them with this epidemic. We're seeing where the gap in these three areas are really damaging to communities and students. We want to make sure that family services strengthen families and prevent intergenerational transmission of ACEs. But a big part of resilience is building children's belief in themselves. And so at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have schools, we have communities, we have PTAs, we have administrators that do just that, and they champion that in their atmosphere. But be you that's on this conference webinar, you be the one caring adult. We make this pledge wherever we go, that the student is going to look for that one adult, and you leave here pledging to be that one caring adult. And finally, we want you to promote hope. Really tough time for students, tough time for teachers, tough time for schools, tough time for our state. But we want you to promote hope and to really sit on the lessons that you have heard today.
And I would add one last thing that we, from the very beginning of this webinar tonight to this point, we're advocating for, and we're going and spending a lot of time on the issue of ACEs and resilience, because we believe that we can reduce the impact of ACEs on children and we can prevent future ACEs from happening. We believe that what happens in our school is critical. We believe that when principals and teachers promote, resilience and promote being trauma informed, that it will significantly impact our children. And when parents are joining in and PTAs are joining in and churches are joining in to being trauma informed, think about what a wonderful world it could be for a lot of our children who are struggling. And we also want to end this part of the discussion by saying one really important thing. We need to fund what we need in our schools. When we look at all these things that we're expecting teachers to do, they can't do it all. We need helping professionals in our school. So each year, I encourage everyone, when your county commissioners, like in Wake is where I live, when the county commissioners look at the budget every year, I'm there asking for more money for social workers and counselors and psychologists. When the General Assembly sets their 2-year budget every year, I want to be there. I want you to join us in being there advocating for the help and professionals we need. And so it happens, I want you to be at your school board advocating for the policies and the programs that your children need in their school. Policies around, how they deal with discipline and expulsions and suspension. You want to make sure that your school is trauma informed and is considering things like restorative justice. Mm-hmm. And ways that kids can learn to control their own emotions and behavior, calming techniques, meditation, mindfulness. There's lots of social, emotional learning techniques that teachers need in professional development. So if we're all advocating together, we can, as you saw at the end of the film, we can do this, we can get there. And I believe that significantly. And Nadine Harris Burke, who you saw in the film, she was appointed last fall to be the first Surgeon General of the state of California. Her entire platform is around trauma, is around adverse childhood experiences, and starting with every state agency, starting with every medical facility, every physician's office, trying to make them trauma informed and reaching out through the school system. So, wow, wouldn't that be great in North Carolina if we had a Surgeon General who was a doctor, a pediatrician like her, that had a keen interest in our children. So maybe that's a dream, something that we can work on and hope for the future. I just want to, as we're nearing the end of our conversation, I want to tell you that we have worked so hard over the last 3-4 years almost on these resources on Public Schools First. Please go to our website and look under issues. You can see issues right here. I hope. I can't tell if my, can you see my mouth?
Yeah, I see.
Oh, yay for Yvonne. She did something. You see issues? And hopefully you can see, if you click on that, you find resources. And these are all, the resources we have. There's lots and lots of resources there that are very important for parents, for teachers, for any educator. And also, we invite you to send us your resources. You probably have a lot of resources and things that you're using in your classroom. If you send us and allow us to share it, we'll post it on our website, or we'll share it on Facebook and Twitter. If you have a technique, if you have a lesson plan, if you have a something that you've done with your kids that really works, we want to know about it. And the people who have already started asking us, what are we going to be doing next? Because a lot of people didn't get on tonight. We want to tell you a couple things. One is that on April the 6th, Broken Places is we're going to be working with UNC Public Broadcast PBS on UNC to show Broken Places. It is a kind of follow-up to Resilience in the sense that it's been following the same kids for about 20 years. And looking at how some of these kids were able to develop resilience and succeed and overcome, and some were not. And it's a very intriguing and emotional and well-made film. We hope you'll watch it. And we're probably going to have some kind of after-film discussion with that. We won't have it on April the 6th. You see the film is shown as 10 o'clock. We're not going to keep you up at midnight to have after-film discussion, but we are thinking about maybe having one the next night to allow us to talk together about, Broken Places. Also, I'm so proud that we just got this slide put in here tonight, is that we have been so successful showing the film tonight that we're working with the film company to see if we can offer a 72-hour screening soon. That would be a time where for 72 hours, anyone could go on and watch Resilience, Paper Tigers, which is also about a school that took resilience to heart and restorative justice to heart, refused to expel any child, and instead worked for ways to keep kids successful. And it's a very powerful film. And there's also a film we'll be showing called Dyslexia, about dyslexia. Are You Dyslexic is the name of it. So we are excited. We look forward to sharing this with you. We're going to have a lot of things coming up. So we really, really need you to give, to join our website, go on our website, join our newsletter, the drill, like us on Facebook, whatever, connect with us so we can tell you about these exciting things that are coming up.
And in closing, we can work together to really promote resilience in our families and communities. And this is a charge not just to kids in schools, but our communities are now addressing a very difficult time. And we need to shift this conversation to the schools that's occurring in everybody's living room and everybody's kitchen. And so we really want you to promote this. And again, you be that one caring adult for the students in your community and in your home.
And so I wanted to give some time here as we're coming to the end to see if anyone has any questions, any comments that you would like to share. If you put those in the chat box there, we will be able to see them and we will share them out with the rest of the audience. Any questions, any comments, anything that you'd like to share?
We already have a lot of questions coming in. Joseph wants to know, how do students who have high ACE scores overcome the barriers?
So my background is with alternative schools. Primarily, I started out with residential programs, which was kids who were sent for disciplinary reasons to schools out in rural communities. And what I've seen is the barrier that really overcomes that, number one, is seeing that role model, that adult role model demonstrate really resilience with the child themselves. Also, a healthy relationship with an adult, a healthy relationship that allows the student to really understand perspective. But the third part really is the child really understanding that they can actually overcome whatever is concerning them. And now that takes healthy relationships, that takes time, but also there are ways in which the adults outside of the classroom can really foster and encourage the identity of that individual student. so that they can improve self-confidence, it can improve self-worth, sort of was mentioned earlier.
And you know, I would add just one or two sentences and just say that that's kind of why we need these helping professionals, so they can intervene. We often, for children, need intervention. They need some of the trauma removed, reduced, interfered with, and that comes with often connecting them to services, or the family to services they really need. I want to let another question come.
We've got another one here. Linda wants to know, what should happen legally in a school setting if an educator is concerned about a child's safety and home environment?
Normally, that is shifted to either the social worker or psychologist or counselor, depending on the nature of the incident. And normally, those three helping professionals are well equipped. They know the law, they know the process, they know the sort of the protocol from moving from point A to Z. The ideal situation would be where, you know, sort of the helping professionals are decentralized and they're sort of in proximity to classrooms, and they're pushing into classrooms to sort of see firsthand what's happening in the classroom and what the teachers are observing firsthand. So that would be an ideal situation, but once the teachers shift that on to the professionals, they're well equipped to fully understand sort of the legal barriers across whatever situation that may be.
All right. Jessica wants to know, are there any suggestions for working with families who are resistant to using available mental health services?
That's very, very hard question. And I would like to kind of, I guess I would throw the ball back to what Terrence had said, in that you have to work with the helping professionals in your school. You cannot go around them or over them if you're the educator or the teacher or the whatever, because you have to go to those folks. And there are families who are resistant. And I think one of the, not just the helping professionals, but often the principal has a lot of influence with families, and as a good place to also go talk with the principal. But honestly, I think that if you can get the family to meet with the social worker or the counselor, that's the very first step, and it's very important. And usually parents are willing and eager to hear how they can help their kid. And it's not usually, teachers have to kind of stay focused on classroom performance and work to do and behavior in the classroom. And it's a good thing to hand off that then to the counselors and psychologists and social workers, how to deal with the family intervening. So it's a very tricky situation, but it can be done, and the principal and the counselor working together is your best bet.
All right, another question. What types of things can we embed into our curriculum to help high school students build their resiliency?
Well, I would argue that there's moments in your really lesson plan where you can demonstrate, or have moments where the students, in terms of building relationships, have time to really address what's concerning them. Moments where there's a timeout, or there's a seat next to the teacher, or there's a moment where each student has a sketching pad and they're allowed to really express themselves, or there's a journal that's not graded and the student's allowed to communicate, or there's another professional in the building that student has a close relationship with, and you almost tag team with that professional to have moments where that student can go and really foster that healthy relationship. And so in terms of the curriculum itself, there's moments in which your curriculum will highlight sort of incident, let's say if you're a history teacher, moments in which there's stories or incidents that really speak to resilience or the difficulty of moments, and you can use that to really hold classroom discussions, and really, use that to share stories around what does it mean to respond well or to recover or to understand how difficult the moment is from all perspectives.
And incorporate within your classroom. If your school doesn't do restorative justice, maybe you do that within your classroom. Maybe you look for a way to build relationships among not just you and your students, but among your students, so that your students can get along well with each other and have some way for peers to show mutual respect, and you reward that in your classroom. I think that's also the entire school climate is one in which is looking to validate the worthiness of every child, celebrate their diversity and their uniqueness, and give them all a chance to have success. And that's really something that should be all of our goals every day as educators, but as parents or as youth leaders, coaches. These are things that we should be holding high as our goals. So I see someone's really interested in some of these other films, and I would say that if you go to, is it KPJR Films, and you Google that, you will see Paper Tigers and Broken Places and some of these other films, and at least have an opportunity to watch the trailer to see if you'd be interested in those or not. One of the things that we can also share with you is that the work of resilience and identifying ACEs has been pretty powerful, because people tell us that it's really hard to talk about adverse childhood experiences. It's hard to talk about trauma. It's hard to talk about neglect and abuse of children. But now that you've watched the film, we have a kind of a common language we can share now. We all know what ACEs are. We don't have to call them all out. We know what ACEs are. We know what kids' ability to succeed goes down as ACEs go up. And we also know that resilience can trump ACEs, right? So we've learned a lot of common language here now. And the best thing we can tell all of you, someone said, what are the next steps? For to me, if I were an educator in any capacity in the school, I would say that now the next step is self-evaluation and group discussions. We like to go show the film to teachers and then encourage them to say, okay, you've been exposed, you've been kind of educated, you're now trauma informed about this process. And we encourage teachers and their principals and everybody in the school to self-evaluate, to talk about what are we doing now that really works? What are we doing now that really makes a difference and helps our children succeed emotionally or academically? And then what are we doing that we could really change? We saw one school changed how it puts the sign they put out front of the school. Now says, oops, you're late. No worries. Check in here. That's a lot different than, all people who are tardy must go to the office and da 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 da. So that seemed like a small thing to some, but it was big to a lot of kids who were very scared of being late, worried about being late. We have a lot of teachers who've told me that they now have a trauma-informed secretary who doesn't say things like, you better tell your mom to get you to school on time. And instead they say, oh, Terrence, we're so glad you could join us today. Here's your pass, get on back to school. I'm glad you're here. That's a really different approach too. And as someone who was often late to school, and I was not responsible for being late to school, I was a kid. And when I got to school, I was reprimanded and embarrassed for coming into the classroom late. And I was embarrassed because the principal asked me, well, why couldn't my mother get me to school on time? Those things damaged me and made it very hard for me, and built me up at a resistance of a lot of anger towards the school leaders, right? So we know that those are ways that we don't have to act, and we can be trauma informed and figure out different ways to communicate to that child and to those parents as they drive up to the school, as they enter the school, as they interact with everybody in the school, that we can do that differently and more effectively.
And we know that every trauma incident is not recorded in the schools. There's bullying incidents that's not recorded. No one's caught, not caught on camera. Adult wasn't present, but it impacts the student the same way. We know incidents of racism occurs in schools. It's not always documented. But if a trauma-sensitive school, trauma-sensitive personnel, trauma-sensitive administrators, you're able to see the change in the student. And that's really what we're trying to hint here. There's going to be a change that somebody who's sensitive to the impact of trauma will see and be able to intervene early.
Okay, I think we could take a few more questions. Anyone have anything else before we wrap it up? I want to keep our promise to keeping this to 9:30 if we can. Elizabeth, anything else that you see that hasn't been answered?
We've got one here. Do you know if any pediatricians or schools in North Carolina are screening for ACEs?
I do know that there are pediatricians screening for ACEs. And I know that the American Medical Association is tuned into this. I know that the North Carolina Medical Association has been exposed to this whole issue. I know that in Wake County they have been. Lots more pediatricians are doing that. It's very exciting to see that. We have a group of folks who have been working for the last couple of years trying to make businesses trauma informed, making sure that they they understand what's going on and are supported, and will help us lobby for funding and the staffing we need. It's getting better, but it's not good enough yet. We need a lot of work there. Any final thoughts, Terrence? I'll give you a minute and a half, and then I'll take the last minute and a half, and we'll let folks go get some rest.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, you know, that connection between a child's health and a child's trauma that they experience, it changes me, and it changed me in the terms of how I see students. And if we see these individuals comprehensively, not just a behavior that we're seeing that's being displayed, but if we try to look for the whole human, I think it changed how you approach relationships with different students. And if nothing is taken away, again, you be the one caring adult.
And I will wrap that up by saying I could not say that any better. It only takes one. When I look back over my life, I had that one caring adult in my mother, who even in her own traumatized life, where domestic violence was present, my mother always told me I was beautiful and smart and capable. I had a grandmother who encouraged me that I could do anything I ever wanted to do. Even when I failed, she would tell me I was doing great. I had teachers. I had a teacher who saved my life in the 8th grade because I was being bullied. And I was becoming a bully to fight back. She taught me how not to do that. She built confidence and gave me tips and how to handle myself. She connected me with the help I needed in the school. I had a high school teacher who helped me get into college. And so that one caring adult showed up for me in my life at times when I could have literally lost my life. And it's very important that you take that to heart, that it does take one caring adult, hashtag be the one, as we always like to say. So thank you, friends. This has been one of the most exciting nights of our lives. My dyslexia is coming up because you showed up for the film and you showed up for some discussion. Sure hope we can all talk together again. Stay connected and look for other opportunities with Terrence and I in the future. Good night.
Good night.